Hello, I hope everybody has been having a good week. I am double checking that yes, the sound is on. I am recording. A while ago, I had done an entire class, hour and a half, and we found out at the end that I had not been recording. So I had to cover the same material in about 15 minutes. But that does not look like it's the case today. I wanted to talk about the rest of the term. We have about a little bit over a month left, and we're starting to get a couple things in that I wanted to look at. The structure and skin, I went through and graded everything that I received. Things are looking pretty good with some little tweaks here and there that we talked about during the discussion. Please take care of those issues as quick as you can and resubmit, and I will grade that right away. We also have two submissions for the biomorphic abstraction, and I wanted to talk about those again. And then we also have a submission for the color tiles, and I wanted to talk about that. So that's three different things I wanted to talk about. And if anybody does join me live, then we'll talk about more of that as well. So, and it looks like I asked everybody who for the attendance to look at the other videos. We were having a heck of a time because every time I tried to send out the playlist, that link was not working at all. I have no idea why that's the case. But what is really nice is we've got that. I just sent out the links directly to the videos, and everybody was able to access those without a problem. So I think that's one issue solved, which is really nice. So I think we've already talked about the structure and skin. If you have any questions of that, please get a hold of me right away. Mention that one student was having an issue with understanding the assignment. We talked about it, and the submission that they turned in was really excellent. We were able to work through all those issues. If we need to talk about that some more, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. If you need to talk to me directly, you have my cell phone. Please text me and we'll set up a time. When you do, make sure that you let me know which class you're in and what your name is, so I know it's we can make sure it's the right person, the right class. Okay. So I want to go ahead and show you, we've got two submissions for the biomorphic abstraction, and I wanted to show those to you. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then we're going to talk quite a bit about the tiles, the color tiles, and then show you the submission on that. Okay, so this is the first submission, and this is really impressive to me. As a person, you can see that there are two different views of this. Some of the things that we talked about regarding this is that it needed to be biomorphic and abstracted, biomorphic or organic. And that's one big issue. Another big issue is that it needed to be smooth, and it couldn't have any of the actual surface of the original block you've got. What I like what this person did is they really took that to heart. I mean, there are elements here where it almost looks to me like folding skin from when you curve your finger around. There's elements here that look almost like plant material. Some of them look like looks like it may be a round leaf or something, and a round ball. It really doesn't matter what directly inspired this thing. What this person did is they did some really nice things with the carving to make this look abstract for one thing, but it also is very organic. And this turned out really well. The person also took the time to smooth this down. with the sandpaper and the files. And that really shows an awful lot of preparation and work doing this. That is important because we're going to be applying paper mache to this next week. So it needs to be done, it needs to be smooth, and it needs to be ready to apply the paper mache. So I think that this is a really good example of something that's ready to go. If we look at the next one, I think this is an excellent example of something that this is a great start. This is an excellent start. It makes me think that the person was sending me just the initial carving. And what I like about this is you can see that they have a couple other shots as well that they submitted. But what you can see is that this person, they cut a hole through it. It's obvious that it's abstracted. And it's also obvious to me that it has its inspiration in organic shapes, in organic volumes. A couple of things that this person still needs to work on is smoothing it down. This needs to be a lot smoother before they can apply the paper mache. And I think we can see right here, there's several areas that look like it's still the initial block surface that we've got to get rid of. So for this person, I would say find an area where you can smooth it down. It'll probably take about a half an hour, 45 minutes of sanding to get all this curved. But definitely work on that sanding because we can't have any of that original surface from the original block showing. And these chisel marks demonstrate that this person was carving pretty good at this, and all those need to be sanded away. And sometimes it can help to go at it with a file first. I know there are students that have in the past had sensitivity to those kind of textural qualities while they work on it. And they've suggested alternative materials, which I think are really good. So keep working on that if that includes you. On this case, I think that this would be excellent for the person to start just sanding this down and start with the file to get that rounded all the way around, and then go at it with sandpaper. Now, it's going to be almost impossible to get this perfectly smooth because the material isn't going to lend itself to that. But I think that this student has demonstrated you can get it really smooth. This is with the same kind of block foam material, and this is the kind of smoothness we're talking about. So you can see that it's not perfectly smooth like polished marble. We're not talking about that. We're talking about smoothing it down so it feels organic, it feels flowing. So on this, that's what I would recommend. Going through, smoothing it down, getting rid of the surface plane that was in the original block. You smooth it first with your files, and then smooth it with the sandpaper, and get that done because we need to use that to apply the paper mache to. All right. So I think both of these are looking, I love the forms that the people are making with both of these. I think that works out really well. And I want to go back to the carved biomorphic abstraction page and show that some more. These are some of the student examples from the past. We talked about abstraction last week quite a bit. And on this one, now, I'm not expecting you guys to make two pieces. That's not the point. What the point is, I want you to look at how smooth this person, now this is carved plaster, which is going to be a different set of circumstances, and it required a lot more work. And I don't think you guys need to be doing that kind of level of work with plaster, and that's one of the reasons why we're not doing it. But what I want you to look at this is look at how this feels organic. Yes, this is roughly a square, but notice how relatively floppy the shape feels. We have a hole in it. We have some areas that are scooped out, other areas that emerge out. We look over here, we can see that it almost feels like it's folding over a little bit. And I love what this person has done with sanding these areas down so that they're feeling smoother. Now, yours is going to be purple. It's not going to be the same color, and that's fine. They're different materials. And I really like this. Reminds me a little bit more of the first one we looked at, where you have a lot of different forms that are coming together. Let's see. So we have a lot of different forms coming together, where we have, it looks like inspired by a lot of plant forms or maybe teeth. And I think that's why I'm liking this one, because it feels kind of twisted with a lot of different inspirations. Again, I'm responding to the organic shapes, the abstract nature of it, and how things are relatively smooth. This is another really good example of that, where things have been sanded down and smoothed. Now, again, these are out of plaster, but I want you to look at the shapes. I think that the shapes of these are really a good thing to look at. Pay attention to that, how abstracted it is, how it still feels organic. And again, they're sanded down really well. This almost makes me think of like a pelvis type structure. And this person has included like 3 different images. I like how it's scooped out in places. And again, it's sanded and really smooth. That's important for the sculpture because this is intended to feel like it is or a biomorphic structure or organic structure. So there's some elements of this where it feels like flanges on a vertebra. And I think that is a really intriguing shape just by itself. I love how the 3 different lobes and each one is treated differently. This has a bump here. This is a little bit smoother here. And this isn't scooped out at all. It almost looks like some weird kind of fusion of a jack and a vertebra. I like how this person included several different examples. And the next step is we're going to be covering it with paper mache. So we'll talk about that next week. But here's a video on paper mache that I want you to look at as well. And I give an example of that. Now in your kits, you have a container that has a bag of glue in it and a bag of flour. And that's to make the paper mache with. And for paper, you can use newspaper is good, or paper towels. It's also good. People have also used cloth. I don't think that is a terrifically good idea because it's a lot harder to sand. And what you'll do with the paper mache is apply 1 layer of paper mache, sand it down, and then when it dries, and then apply a second layer. And I am doubling up a couple of things because over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be needing to do the paper mache and the texture and color cubes. So that is something to keep in mind. Paper mache is going to take a couple hours one day and then a couple hours the next day. And each of the cubes, you're going to be making 2 cubes. So that's 12 faces altogether. 6 of those are going to be color collages and 6 of those are going to be textured. And those will take a few hours as well. And so I'm doubling them up because overall, the overall time will be about the same as this stuff that you've been spending, than the amount of time you've spent on these other modules already. So I am. Oh, Emily, you're here. Okay, great. I did not see that you came in. Did you see?
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to share the examples of the organic abstraction, the biomorphic abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
This is, we only have 2 examples that came in, but I wanted to show them, and I'm glad you're here because I want to have a little bit of conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to talk about the assignment a little bit too. Now I know that this is something that most people have not gotten to. That's what is working on this week, and I've got to say that your submission for the structure and skin turned out so much better than the initial one you shared with me.
Thank you.
And I'm hoping that when people look at the grades, everybody, I put notes on them and stuff, and most of them we did talk about in class as well. So please, when you see that, follow my notes. And if you have any questions like Emily, uh, give me a text or an email, and we will set up a time to talk about it. Um, and Emily, after our discussion, what you turned in was absolutely fantastic. So I'm
I'm
very
so glad. I almost sent you more photos of what I had made, but I was like, I think I followed like what we talked about pretty well. So I just was like, I'll turn it in, and if he gives me feedback, I'll take it. But I think the first discussion really helped.
that's good. And again, when I'm giving feedback like that, it's I know that all of you guys are professional artists as it is, and so the feedback is not I'm not trying to validate your artwork or anything like that. All I'm doing is giving feedback in relationship to the parameters of the assignment, and that's it. So I hope everybody understands that. Now, we did talk about abstraction last week. We talked about I there's a couple of videos that talk about carving the foam, and I'm hoping people are not having a difficult time with this. Um, I what is interesting with these are all out of plaster, and carving plaster takes on average about 4 times longer than carving foam, which is why I don't want you guys to have to do it. And there are some consistencies. I'm showing you these because of the consistencies with the shape. And after seeing these images, I hope, does it make a lot more sense now when I talk about organic or biomorphic abstraction, the kind of shape that we're looking for? Does it make a lot more sense when you see these kinds of images?
Yeah, for sure. Like they do look like they could be part of something living.
Well, and like these make me think of like shoulder blades that have holes worn through them. You know, that like this one makes me think of that. They they seem to me like they have their inspiration rooted in bone shapes. This, for some reason, makes me think of a cross between broccoli stalks and seashells. I see the fluting that you see in like broccoli stalks right here, and then that curving and looping that you see in seashells. That's what that makes me think of. This it makes me think of bones fused with like a kneeling figure somehow. Are you seeing any of these kinds of inspirations as well, Emily?
Yeah, my favorite is the one that kind of looks like a seashell, and I even see more things the more I stare at it because it looks like such a common pattern in nature. And usually when um, I make art, I try to get a reference. So I thought this was kind of a fun exercise in just like instead of using a reference, just try to make something that looks like it maybe could be something just from the idea of what I have seen before.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that approach. You know, using the natural world to kind of inform what you're doing instead of directly using it as a specific reference. And for whatever reason, this one makes me think of a hip bone. It really makes me think of like crumbled up paper fused with like a pelvis or something. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. But I think they've done a really good job. And this one, it makes me think of a fusion between a jack and a vertebra. I
Yeah.
think I'm really glad that this student took four different photos of it. But I think that's it's really fascinating.
I do
And
have a, I don't know if you talked about it at all already or you're planning to, but I do have a question. Um,
on this particular thing,
Not on that particular thing, just about this assignment.
oh, okay. What's the question on the assignment?
How would you suggest going about planning it? Um, since I've never carved something in a subtraction form before, and I watched the videos about uh, that are on like in the on this page for like step one of watch the reference videos of people showing us how they did it. But do you have any tips that have helped people for planning their
Yes,
first
absolutely.
subtraction carving?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I am trying to find right now something that really helped me out, and I am having a hard time tracking it down.
It looked like on at least one of the examples um, that they started with the block and then like kind of drew the front and the side and the back on each side in marker and then just kind of tried tried to go around those angles of what they drew on the outside of the cube. So I could
Yeah, and
try to
I
do
think that
that.
that is a really good approach. Let's see if I can find. Okay, I found a couple things that I think kind of suggest the direction that I'm thinking. One is this image. If you think of your block of foam just as a block, and can you, Emily, can you see what I'm seeing? It's just a bunch of images.
Yeah, I can see him.
Okay, um, this I'm just using this as a reference point because we have the top surface, we have a side, and we have another side. And one of the easiest ways to start with this is to take your block and hold it in front of you with one corner facing you, and then draw an image on this side, draw an image on this side, and draw an image on this side with a felt tip marker, like a Sharpie. And the reason why I'm saying this is what you'll, and it almost doesn't matter what image you start drawing, but take the first one and take one of the knives that you have in your kit, and like if you have a shape right here, let's say it's a circle, just curve straight down all the way to reveal that silhouette that you've drawn on the top surface. So if this is a circle, if you cut down all the way on the four edges, you're going to get um, a pillar, a cylinder. Does that make sense?
That's yeah, that's a good idea to think of it um,
Okay.
as a
And then the
silhouette.
next step, the next step would be to look at, where you have this face is now going to be shaped a little bit different because you've carved, a cylinder. Redraw your drawing on this and do the same thing. You know, cut through all the way, the edges, whatever edges you have left. And then when you've done that on this face, do the same thing on the third face. And what that's going to do, if we go down to this image right here, um, it's going to, let's see, we look at this owl-shaped image. From the top, we have that kind of a shape that looks almost like a bat. From the front, we have this kind of a shape now. And from the side, you can kind of see how the beak and forehead would come out. Then we'd come down underneath the beak. We come out for the belly and the wings, and we come out for the feet. Do you kind of see what I'm getting at? If we work
Mhm.
from that kind of direction, where we just look at the top, carve that out, look from one side, carve that out, look from another side, and carve that out. I'm
Yeah, I
hoping
think
this is
that
kind of
is that's a
what's that?
helpful. Yeah, that's a good way to break it down into steps.
And then we can see how this person kind of did that, where they're carving away along the edge here to get this face starting to reveal. And if you just do that same kind of thing on each of those edges, on each of those faces, you're going to get a shape that looks very different from the block, and then you can just start carving into it and shaping it with your sandpaper and your files. And we're not looking for you to make a face. We don't want you to make a face. We don't want you to make an owl We don't want you to make a Pinewood Derby car. What I want you to do is just start carving into this, thinking, keeping in your mind ideas like seashells and broccoli and different kind of forms like that, because you will start with a block like this, but by playing with it and carving away different edges and things like that, you're not going to get, we're not looking to make a face, but we are looking to make something that the block is hiding. And I want to share, let's see, I'm going to share this. Can you kind of see what this artist, this student did with that? If we
Mm-hmm.
imagine that we started with a block, she probably cut maybe some of this silhouette out first and maybe carved a little bit of this hole. And then you can imagine in your mind, hopefully, that she turned it a little bit, did the same kind of thing to get rid of this area, maybe. And maybe she looked at the top and did a little bit more carving. Is that making a little bit more sense?
Mm-hmm. And then also in some of the example videos, some people uh, carved off a like a slice and then glued it on somewhere else to kind of extend the shape of their sculpture rather than just being contained within a cube. Do you think that the hot glue we have in our kit would be capable of that with styrofoam, or would we try, if we wanted to do that, try a different glue?
I would recommend trying a different glue. There
Yeah.
are two-part or glues like rubber cement where you put the glue on both sides, wait a minute, and then stick it together. That's going to be a lot more effective.
Gotcha.
For these blocks, what we actually have to do most of the time is we get like a spray can of something like rubber cement, spray it on
Mhm.
the two different sheets, and then glue them together after they dry for a minute, and that works really well.
Okay,
Um,
that's
but
cool.
I would definitely, if you want to do that, I'd say go for it. Most of the time, it's a big enough pain in the neck that we just say stick to the block. But if you want to do
Mhm.
that, I'd say go for it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, and I'm sorry if that seems a little bit unclear. The videos talk about it a little bit better, and I was hoping that the the things that I found would make it a little bit more clear, but unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. A lot of the times, I describe this when I'm in front of students, so it's um, a little bit problematic to do this just on video. But if we look at what this student has done, we have enough different views that if you can imagine your purple block being in front of you and just seeing that how they might have drawn this on one of the broad faces and then just cut it away, and then this is the back and you can kind of see how they might do that, and then on this, on one of the narrow ends, maybe they would have cut that silhouette out and to trim away some more material. And then here you can see maybe on the top they cut this kind of shape out to get that form. And I'm hoping that that kind of makes more sense. Does that make sense a bit?
Yeah, yeah, and also one of the teachers in the videos that you linked for us says that she also just tells her students they have to start somewhere and just try to figure out as they go. So that was also
Yeah.
helpful because I don't think I could be much of a perfectionist about this one.
Well, no, and I think that I'm glad you said that because that is a common issue that I think is very important to address. Uh, we hear perfectionist. I mean, we're our own worst critics as artists because we're not judging the work for what it is. As we are working, we are constantly thinking, how can I do this better for next time? Because that's how our brains work. But the problem with that is we are judging what we are doing now by what we imagine we will be doing later when we readdress it. And that is not going to work because this is the first time you guys have ever done this. And I want you to remember that perfect does not mean it looks like it was done by Japanese robots 1,000 years in the future. The synonym for perfect is not no mistakes. That is not a synonym for perfect. Perfect, the synonym is complete, finished. And so when we describe ourselves as perfectionists, what we are thinking constantly is, I've got to tweak it this because I can do it better next time. I'm going to I'm making this little change, but it's not quite right. I can see how I'm doing it better. Well, I don't want you to do any of that. What I want you to do is envision this from the perspective of, when will it be done? When it's going to be done is when you follow the parameters of the assignment, not when you've gotten to the point where you can't see any more mistakes, because you will never get to that point. And the reason you will never get to the point where you don't see any more mistakes is that you are not fairly judging your own work. What you are doing is judging what you are doing now in light of what you are learning as you are doing it. What that means is you are constantly changing where the goal sits. You're constantly changing what the end game is. And that's not what we want. Perfect does not mean there are no more mistakes. Perfect only means it's finished. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Okay. Because then, when you look at the sculpture as we talked for the structure and skin, as we talked about at first, there were issues with it because it didn't follow the parameters of the assignment. When you look at it next, it was perfect because it was complete. It followed the parameters of the assignment, and now it was finished. Does that make sense?
Yep, totally.
Okay, good. That's what I want you to be thinking of as you address this. So yeah, go through these videos. Watch this video about sculpting and carving foam. It's 4.5 minutes long. Watch this one from Stephanie Metz. These are really good to get you in the headspace of what we're making. And I also, when you watch these, if the artist looks like they're being really smooth and perfect and everything like that, just remember that this is 7.5 minutes condensed from what is probably going to be about 4 days of work. And if you are like anybody else on the planet, you're going to be curating your own content so that other people don't see all the swear words. They don't see all the times you drop something on your foot, and they aren't going to see the times that you caught yourself in the camera picking your own nose, because all that stuff is edited out. So please do not be harsh on yourself. And I want to share this next one as well, because I think that this is a really good image of where we're starting from. What I like about this is you can see very clearly they started from this face. They cut out this area. They cut out that area. They cut out this area, made it curve. They cut out that. Then you can see very clearly that they turned it and they cut out this. So, if we're looking at it from this face here, you can see that they trimmed it along this edge. They trimmed it along that edge. They trimmed it along here. They trimmed it to get this shape coming in and bellying out. And then again, from the top and the bottom, they did the same kind of thing, trimming these edges. Now, what this person needs to do now is to go back over this and smooth this so we don't see any of that remaining face of the original foam block. And it is going to make a mess, and I am sorry about that. That's just the nature of the beast, but this is a lot easier than working with plaster. So I hope that helps everybody as they are moving on this. And I want to get to the next one. And again, as you're doing this, submit what you have, because then I'll give you the points and talk about it, and then we can move on from there as you make the changes and everything. So before we move to that, Emily, do you have any other questions about this element or this particular module?
You mentioned that it's gonna make a mess, and then I just remembered. Do you recommend that we wear like a face covering over our mouth and nose?
I think it's probably not completely necessary until you start sanding. And I would say just a regular dust mask would be just great.
Okay.
If it's not windy, you could probably do this outside. And I would get like a shower curtain or a sheet from DI or something like that. Set up shop on that. Do all your carving on that. Brush off your clothes and everything like that. Stomp your feet to get it off your clothes, and then gather up the sheet or the shower curtain, shake it, and dump that into a garbage bag to throw it away. Or if it's a
Perfect.
cheap enough shower curtain, um, throw that away. But I would say another good way to do this would probably be to get a couple large garbage bags, cut the bottom and cut along one edge, and then you can spread it out. That gives you a pretty good sized tarp, and you can even tape two of those together and work over that. And then when you're all done, you can roll that up and throw it away because it's already a garbage bag, and that's probably going to be the easiest way to clean up after this. But I think when you start sanding, that's when I would, if you're going to worry about a dust mask, that's when I'd probably worry about it.
Okay, sounds good.
And I was talking to you, forgetting that was sharing the screen on this page. Now,
That's fine.
this next module, we already have somebody has already done this or started working on this, and I wanted to share that really quick as well. I'm going to stop sharing this really fast, and I'm going to let's see. And I want to show you what this person turned in because the let's see. I'm going to get to the point where we can see that, but I'm not going to show it right now. We'll talk about this a bit, and I'll show you what was turned in just a moment. Let's see if I can get to this. Okay, all right. I was just setting that up so we can talk about it in just a minute. I do want to share a video as to why this is important, and I'm thinking I do have three. You could probably hear that. That wasn't intended for you to hear. Let me share this screen really quick. Emily, can you hear my dog whining in the background?
I heard something.
Yeah, when she gets bored, she's a, a terrier, and when she gets, she's really way too smart for her own good. When she gets bored, she does everything that I did when I was 7 years old to irritate my mom, which is
Uh-huh.
just find the most obnoxious whining sound in the world and say, "I'm bored" over and over again. And that's what Ayla's doing right now. And it's very
Nice.
aggravating. So every once in a while, when it gets really loud, the sound filter isn't getting it out. So if you guys hear what sounds like somebody in pain in the other room, it's my dog whining because she is bored out of her skull.
Nice.
Now, what we are going this next module is, like I said, there's a couple shorter modules that are kind of crowded together and overlapping because each of them they don't take the full time for a week. But I want you to work on them as you can, and sometimes it helps to if you're working on the plaster or the paper mache and you want to take a break, go work on this one, then come back to the paper mache or back and forth, whichever. But texture and light, um, we've talked about visual texture, we've talked about tactile texture, we've talked about activating space around something. But one of the things that a lot of sculptors don't talk about is the color and paint. or how color can activate visual texture and different elements like that. Because I think a lot of the times when we think of high sculpture, we have this imaginary hierarchy that puts marble at the top of the hierarchy. And not just marble, but white marble. And this kind of frustrates me because this emerged as an idea of the hierarchy of sculpture during the Age of Enlightenment, and that was the time period shortly after the Renaissance and Baroque. This was when people wanted to try to catalog things and put things in a hierarchy for basically establishing some sort of an academic setting or something that helps us to put things into a category that tells us what's higher, what's lower, what's better, what's worse. But also, it also gives us the kind of categorization that we need for things like using evolution to categorize biological development, or using the Dewey Decimal System for cataloging books in a library. So, on one hand, it's helpful in organizing things. On the other hand, this mindset, I think, gives us a false hierarchy, so that people have this kind of um, idea of where their art might fit in the world that may not always be honest and fair to the art itself. But that's a whole discussion for another day. When marble was actually carved originally, the Greeks and Romans painted it. And a lot of people didn't believe this for a long time, and it didn't even emerge as reality, as accepted history and reality, until about the 90s, as recently as the 90s. And the reason is during the Renaissance, as people were looking back at what the Greeks and Romans left, they wanted to give that same kind of gravitas to their own work. This is the kind of atmosphere that produced sculptors like Michelangelo. And if you look at some of that Renaissance marble work, it is absolutely astounding what they were able to do. And then in Baroque, what like Bernini did with marble during the Baroque period is just astounding, where you can actually almost feel fingertips pressing into flesh. Or looking at Michelangelo's Pieta is just astounding to see what he was able to do with marble. But keep in mind, they were looking back at the earlier Romans and Greeks. When a family of substance during Renaissance Italy, I'm going to stop my screen sharing and we'll go back to that in just a bit. But when a family of substance during the Renaissance wanted to show off to people, or just even to build their own restful environment, they would buy Roman and Greek sculptures from people whose jobs were to go and dig them up, and they would go and find these old Roman and Greek villas, find the sculptures, dig them up, clean them off, and then deliver them to these Italian families, these wealthy families. The way they would clean it up is, a lot of the times they would find them in the mud, but they had originally been painted by the people who originally carved them. And when these trackers found these things that have been buried in the mud for sometimes 1,000 years or more, the dampness of the mud would have reacted with the paint and bubble it up and just make it look disgusting. So they a lot of the times would skim it off and sand it and polish the marble to get rid of whatever vestiges of this rotting paint that they could. What that meant was that these Italian families would get these pristine sculptures where all the paint had been removed. And so people started thinking that the Greeks and Romans carved marble and left it the way it was. Um, they polished it until it gleamed, and that's how it was done by the Greek and Roman studios that made these things. it wasn't until about the 90s when art historians started looking really closely at surviving sculptures and busts, that they realized that the little flecks of dirt that they found in the pores of the stone were not flecks of dirt at all, but actually remnants of pigment. And so, we have talked about uh, what we're doing texturally, what we're doing with the surface of the material that we're working with. Now we're going to get into paying closer attention to the power of texture, and we're going to talk about what color does. And so that these I want you to watch all three of these videos, but we're only going to watch this one during class. And I think it'll be really surprising. I hope it will be surprising for some of you. For others, you're probably already aware of this. We're going to go ahead and watch this.
When we think of the ancient world,
well, I should say, if this video is not showing up in our recording, I will also include a link to this in the assignment for attendance.
I think of Pompeian wall paintings that are brightly colored, of mosaics from the Greek world that are full of different colors. It was a world of technicolor. So what did sculpture look like in antiquity? Because when we walk through the hallowed halls of museums, we see all this white sculpture that looks somehow pristine, where in fact, marble sculptures and bronze sculptures in the classical world, that is in the Greek and Roman world, and of course also in the Assyrian world, also in the Egyptian world, were brightly colored.
And as it turns out, antiquity has a lot to teach us about our own values and who we've excluded from art history.
This idea that ancient sculpture was not painted started in the Renaissance, and there were some challenges to that as people started to pull sculpture up in the 18th and 19th century, but there were very important art historians, one in particular, Johann Winkelmann, who's often considered to be almost the founder of art history as a discipline. Johann Winkelmann liked his sculpture white and pure.
In fact, Winkelmann wrote, "The whiter the body is, the more beautiful it is." And so we have the development of this connection between whiteness and identity.
What is interesting to me about this is, and this is just an aside, what's fascinating to me is Winkelmann wrote about this in the 18th century, in the middle of the 18th century, 1700s. That is also marks the origin of racism in what would become the United States. In the early 1700s, that's when articles started coming out in newspapers published in the colonies regarding skin color separating indentured servants and slaves, and how they needed to be separated, and this emergence of an idea that color was a deciding factor for intelligence and acceptability. And that's another conversation that we can have that I think is really fascinating to me. But what is really sad is indentured servants at that time were treated in a very similar class as the African and indigenous slaves that were in forced servitude. The biggest difference between them is that most of the time, indentured servitude did not have a genetic component where the children of indentured servants would also become servants. And whereas the indigenous and African slaves, their children were forced into slavery. And the second biggest difference between those two groups of people was that, for the most part, indentured servants were coming over from Europe. And of course, the indigenous and African slaves were forced into slavery from Africa and the indigenous population. So I just think it's fascinating that Winkelmann wrote about the white purity of marble at the same time of this emerging consciousness of separating indigenous servants from other slaves at the time over in the Americas. Just as an interesting aside, but it is fascinating how the kind of intellectual knots people would tie their own brains in to kind of justify this attitude. But anyway, we'll continue with this.
Ideas of purity, of nobility, and an association of those things specifically with Western culture.
And this is where we are so fortunate to have modern science and technology and the working together of archaeologists with conservationists and other types of material scientists to study the marble, to look for traces of paint, because we know when sculpture was pulled up from the ground that in fact painting survived on many of these sculptures. And so one of the statues we're looking at is a reconstruction of the so-called small Herculaneum woman from the island of Delos. And she was excavated in the late 19th century, and we actually have descriptions of how colorful she was when she came out of the ground.
So the first thing we should say is we can never reconstruct these sculptures with absolute certainty.
We absolutely know it was painted. How exactly the colors look, there's always a little bit of guesswork.
One of the things that the color does is it allows us to really understand her clothing.
And what we can see very clearly is that she's wearing silk. The silk is crinkling, as you can see down by her feet, and then she has this lovely mantle wrapped around her. She is the so-called small Herculaneum woman type because a statue almost identical to this was found at Herculaneum in about 1706.
This type of sculpture was very popular among the ancient Romans, who adopted so much of Greek culture as their own.
I believe there are 160 examples of this portrait type, both from the ancient Greek world and the ancient Roman world. In the ancient Roman world, you'd purchase the body and you'd have a separate head or portrait done, and that head would be put into the statue.
So now we're looking at a sculpture of a sphinx, and what's so wonderful is that in this gallery we can compare it to the sculpture as it looks today, and a plaster cast of it showing us how it would have looked on the original stele.
This is an archaic stele. Stele is a grave marker. That means this monument marked the grave of an individual. In all likelihood, the youth that it's depicted, and possibly his younger sister who stands next to him. One of the things that's so remarkable about the stele is its preservation of color in both the stele and in the original sphinx that stood on top of it. There is a lot of color surviving that is visible still to the naked eye. In the case of the stele, we can see a lot of red, but when we go up and look at the sphinx closely, we can see that on the sphinx's breast, there was a very detailed pattern that almost looks like scales, as if she was a bird or having feathers, and that we can even also start to see that pattern and decorating on her wing. It is clear that she was polychrome.
And so in this reconstruction, we see oranges and yellows and golds and blues, and not seeing the stone itself feels shocking.
If you think about this stele being erected in a graveyard, all those steles are competing for your attention. Having something bright, shining, and gold meant that people walking by would look at your grave, look at your stele, and remember you.
We may not be looking at exactly what this sculpture looked like in antiquity, but in a way, art history is an attempt to understand these objects the way that they were originally intended to be seen. And we can only do that imperfectly.
But what we do have to acknowledge is that the aesthetic that we often ascribe to works of art as objects in museums, their audience would have seen them in antiquity in a different way and interacted with them in a different way. And that is a world that by using science and technology we can understand is part of the quote-unquote Western tradition. We are a part of this larger conversation about art and color, and that we need to embrace those changes and rethink the way we look at art.
I really like that video because it points out a number of different things that I think fly against a lot of expectations. Now, hopefully most of you are aware by this time of how much color was on these ancient marble sculptures. One of the things that caused a stir for a time, until of course people came to their senses, was all over England there were portrait busts of Emperor Severus Septimus. And he was the Roman emperor, I believe it was 2nd century, who founded London, or he's credited with founding London. And his portraits, they're the stereotypical white marble. When people started looking at those portraits and examining them, they found that they were dirt caught in the pores of the stone that actually ended up being pigment, and the pigment was really dark. And that caused people to start looking at this a little bit more closely, and they found out that Severus Septimus is a Roman emperor who rose from a family that were, self-made successes that became senators from originally Libya. Severus Septimus was a Roman emperor from, he was an African, he was from Libya, his wife was from Syria. And they've actually found mosaics, portraits that are family portraits with him and his wife and their children, showing them not as Caucasian Europeans, but as people who were from Libya and Syria, which I think is really fascinating because it kind of demonstrates that the ecumenical nature of Rome at its height. And I just think that that is really very interesting. Emily, was there anything that kind of surprised you about the video at all, or did you already know that?
I knew that those statues used to have paint on them, but I don't know if I'd seen like reconstructions of how they might have looked, and it just caught me off guard in that video how kind of gaudy they look because they're so brightly colored and it's so
Yeah,
unexpected. It almost
yeah,
looks like they are
especially
going
that,
to come to life.
right? You know, especially I thought that archer, the archer's clothing really surprised me because it looked like he was Harlequin. You
Yeah, and
know,
also the like the boxer figure having actual eyes in his sockets. I was like, I don't want him looking at me with those
yeah.
eyes.
Excuse me. And it is fascinating when uh, art historians start looking at the contextual elements surrounding these historical items. Then it makes a lot more sense that because then you see these portrait mosaics uh, seem to be a lot more representative of what we think that the world was like at that time. And these kinds of things make a lot more sense. For a while, there was some resistance to the idea that Constantine's Rome was legitimate uh, outside of being in Eastern Italy, which I think is kind of funny. A lot of people disregarded his Eastern Roman Empire because they only concentrated on the Western Roman Empire around Italy. And what's fascinating is that if you look at the Eastern Rome, uh, the depictions of humanity are a lot more consistent with the several different groups and countries and parts of the world that were represented in Turkey at the time of Constantine and the 1,000 years of Rome after him. I just think it's really interesting. Well, the assignment for this module is, let's see, we're going to look at, all right, here we go. No, that's not the right one. Sorry. I thought I had everything teed up and I almost did. Okay. What I've got is I want to show you what the assignment is, and then I want to show you what somebody has submitted already for this assignment. In your kit came in a moving box. And that moving box, you're going to cut up that moving box so that you give yourself 12 cardboard tiles. And these are just, you've got to measure it out. You've got to make sure that they're all consistent, but you need to cut 12 identical 4-inch by 4-inch squares. Half of these will be for texture and half of them will be for color. We have about a half an hour left, and we're going to go through this, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, and then Emily, you're going to represent everybody in the class and ask them some questions. I hope you don't mind.
Heck yeah.
Now, most of you in the class have a really solid 2D art background. Most of you are very familiar with painting and color design, digital work, and things like that. And so the color aspect of this should not be an issue for you. And the textural aspect might be a little bit more of a challenge. So as you go through this, I want you to look up Senses Journey on YouTube and see if you can find some examples of this. But a Senses Journey, I found it really has helped people with social anxiety as well. And if people are just dealing with anxiety in general, a Senses Journey is really good. But I would like you to do this outside and inside as well. It doesn't have to be in your apartment. I wrote this originally during COVID, so it was inside everybody's apartment. You find a place on campus and go around on campus, or do this at the mall, or do that wherever you find yourself inside, as well as outside. And what I want you to do is just set some minutes aside, and I'd say probably about 10 or 15 minutes is going to be really good. And what you are going to be doing is walking around, not paying attention to the sounds around you or anything like that, but you're going to be paying very close attention to the visual textures that you see. So if you're inside, you're going to be, say, for example, you're walking around the mall. You're going to be looking at things like the textures of the fake plants, the textures of the material inside the boxes that hold the fake plants. What are the textures of the materials that people sit on, or the carpet? Or how does the glass reflect the imagery that you see, or what do the walls look like, the bricks? And you're going to be paying really, really, really close attention to all the textures around you. Now, I would suggest when you do this with somebody that you trust, so that they can fend off irritating questions by other people. Sometimes, I don't know how to say this nicely, but sometimes people will give you really odd looks when you do this, because you are paying so close attention to the materials around you. And at the beginning, you're going to look like a normal person, but as you get into this, because all of you are artists, you're going to be at a point when you realize all of a sudden that you hadn't heard anything of the conversations around you. You haven't been paying attention when people have been trying to get your attention, because you are so focused on the textures that you see. So do that inside. And when you do that outside, you might even want to collect some of the material. Make sure that the stuff is material that you can collect. Nothing alive, just like dead grass and things like that from areas that you can, but pay really close attention to things like pebbles, grass, the weeds around you. I like to do this. I mentioned a park and things like that, but I think that this is kind of fun to do if you drive out to an area where nobody's going to bother you and go outside. Just drive out there and check it out as you walk around. And most of the time when you're out there, you can find stuff that it's going to be okay for you to use. Dried twigs, dried sticks, different things like that. And it at the very least, be collecting ideas, and you can even take photos of stuff that you see. And then when you go to make your texture cube, I want you to be considering those textures, and maybe some of the natural stuff that you collected you can use in your texture cube. So that's for the texture one. And the materials, in addition to the materials you gather for texture, also you're going to probably be needing a lot of these kind of materials to help adhere some of the textures that you find, adjust them and manipulate them and then stick them ultimately to the cardboard squares that you've made for your cube faces. One thing that I suggest is even a spray paint can of a neutral color like black, tan, or white is really interesting. Now I want to show you what one of the students has done for this. And I want you to look at their texture cube. Now this one is painted with white spray paint, and I think that this gives it an incredibly fascinating aspect. And you can see on some of these, they've used elements they've cut out and stuck to the cardboard tile, and they've done different things. They've added different elements to it to make a really fascinating textural area. It looks like they've cut the top off of the tile and then added other material to it. And if you want, you can add whatever you want to it. It does the important thing about the texture is that you're spending time thinking this through and putting it together and assembling it. And I've seen people do everything from macaroni shells and crushed up noodles to some really interesting ones, or people have taken leaves and applied that to the surface so it almost looks like feathers or scales. Other people have taken leaves and torn them in half down the central spine and glued that down so that you just see the leading edge of the leaf. That is absolutely fascinating. But you can see that this individual has spent a lot of work developing that texture, and then they spray painted it. So all we see is the texture. And I think that's fascinating. And then they've made it and assembled a cube from it. So that is one aspect of this. And then the second aspect is paying attention to color. As Emily was talking about, some of those color images where we see what the painted sculptures look like originally, it's really startling. Like the small Herculaneum woman, I am really surprised at how brilliant her clothing is and how the person who painted it made it appear so that her shoulder, when it pressed against the inside of the material, you could see the flesh of her shoulder through the silk wrap that she had. Stuff like that is just fascinating to me. But what you're going to do, go through these. Each of these has a different color wheel program. And the color wheel programs are all a little bit different, and some of them are going to be more effective than others. But all of you are very familiar with what a color wheel is. And we're specifically working with the tripartite color wheel, not the pentagonal color wheel, if any of you are familiar with that one. If not, don't worry about it. But here we have red, yellow, and blue are the primary colors, and then we have orange, green, and purple. And what you are going to be doing, whichever, again, I have several different selections here, and if you have a different one that you want to use, that's fine, but it's an online color wheel that you're going to be working with. What you're going to be doing is looking at the different color harmonies or color schemas that program uses. Here we have complementary, which is opposite sides of the color wheel. Monochromatic, where it's variations on the same color. Analogous, where it's the colors that are right next to each other. Split complementary, where we have, say, if one is red, then the direct complementary of that is going to be green, but the split complementary, you're going to have aqua and then a very yellow green kind of thing. All right. Triadic means that they're separated equally across in 3 different areas of the color wheel. And tetradic is it's going to be separated in 4 different equal areas of the color wheel. Now this works is you're going to pick a principal color. Let's see. I'm going to pick a color. So red. And then I'm going to choose a harmony. Now this one, the red shows this is complementary, so it's going to be directly opposite the color wheel from the red that I chose. And if I want to change it, I'm going to move that red dot to a different one, and then it will show me a different kind of green. If I want to change it even more, maybe my principal is going to be an orange, and then I'm going to have blue as a complementary. Now with monochromatic, it's going to be multiple shades of the same color. And there's going to be monochromatic. This just shows 2 different shades, but we can bring this all around and you can see there's a lot of different kind of shades just in that one area of orange. And analogous, we have the principal one is going to be orange, but then we have this yellow, orangish yellow, and we have a red that's hinted with orange. So this is our principal color. The analogous colors are on either side of it. Split complementary, We have orange as the principal, and we have this kind of blue, bluish turquoise, and then we have a kind of a bluish green for the split complementary. Triadic, it's going to be whatever's evenly spaced. So if our principal color is red, it's going to be blue and yellow. If our principal color is kind of a yellowish orange, these are going to be the triadic responses to that. And then tetradic, tetrad is 4 sides. So it's going to be spaced around 4 different areas. And if this is our principal color, you can see how much that changes. So the way to do this element of the assignment is you are going to find a color wheel that you like, and play around with them a little bit. And then what you are going to do is you are going to pick 3 of these harmonies or these color schemes. So maybe complementary, monochromatic, and split complementary. You're going to pick 3 of those. And for each of those 3 that you pick, you are going to pick a principal color, 2 principal colors. So if I'm going to do complementary, maybe my first one is going to be red, maybe my next one is going to be pink. Those are going to be my 2 color sets. And then for monochromatic, maybe my first color is going to be orange, and my next one is going to be violet or purple. And that's fine, it doesn't matter. And then for split complementary, I'm going to do the same thing. Maybe the principal color on one is going to be blue, and the principal color on another one is going to be pale green. The important thing is you have, for this cube, just like with the texture cube, you have 6 faces. You have 6 faces for the color cube. 2 of those faces are going to be complementary. 2 of the faces are going to be monochromatic, and 2 of the faces are going to be split complementary, or whatever the 3 color harmonies that I choose. If I choose 2 faces that are going to be tetradic, that's fine. 2 faces that are going to be triadic, and 2 faces that are going to be split complementary. It doesn't matter. You have 6 faces. 3 faces are going, for each of the 6 faces, you're going to pick, for the total of 6 faces, you're going to be picking 3 color harmonies. And for each of those 3 color harmonies, you're going to be doing 2 color combinations. Okay, Emily, does that make sense?
Yes. Sorry, I was washing dishes. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like a 6-sided cube, and how many color harmonies again? Just 3?
3 color harmonies, and
And
each of
then
those 3
2.
color harmonies, you're going to do 2 different combinations.
Okay.
And that gives you your 6 sides.
Gotcha. Yep. This project honestly is starting to make me excited more than the the other one, because this one I like colors and textures a lot. So I'm excited.
Well, good. That's exciting. That's excellent. Now, with both of these, the texture one, you're going to be covering each face or each of the tiles for your cube with textures. But for the color one, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a color collage for each of these. And here I describe a little bit more, like the color harmonies, triad, complementary, and monochrome, and then I describe what that is. But to express these into tiles, you're going to be using, you're going to be making color collages. You're not going to be painting. I would recommend going and to like 3 different paint stores, getting a bunch of paint chips that give you your colors, and then cutting those up and making collage out of that. And the reason why this is important, and I'll show you down here. Right here, you can see several different examples of people's texture tiles that they've done. This is when we first started this, we just had people make a big texture project, and that seemed to take a long time. And then we started doing smaller texture tiles. And on the difference with this is you can do pretty much whatever you want, but the time component is each one should represent about 45 minutes of work. And that's why I'm thinking, okay, you go out and collect the textures and then carefully glue them on to make these different things. That will give you some really interesting stuff to work with. So you can see the texture tiles is pretty straightforward. For the colors, what you have to do is make collages that have where each collage has at least 6 pieces. And I do say that in the assignment pretty clearly. And you can use magazines you cut up. If you're going to cut up magazines, make sure you have permission to do so, or they're your own. And you can see on all these, this one only has 6 pieces on this side. This one has several more. Some of these are more successful than others. I don't think that this is particularly successful because you can see that you have one piece right here. They use the tetradic color scheme on this. They use one piece for the background and then 3 more pieces. That only gives us 4 pieces, so it doesn't quite do it. It needs to have 6 pieces for the color collage. Here, you can see they did a lot here, but here there's only 3 pieces on this right there. Now, this one, this is a little bit more successful. They cut elements out of a magazine, and they actually pieced together several different flowers here. This is a bunch of squares from paint chips from a hardware store, and so is this. So they tried really hard to make sure that there was at least 6 pieces in these color collages, and that's what you've got to do. This one, not so much. This one is successful because that's 7 or 8. This one, I like how they made that pattern, but again, this is more than 6 pieces, so that's good. This one, it looks to me like there's only 3 pieces, so not so good. And this, only 3 pieces here. And this texture, this is kind of disappointing to me because I can pretty much guarantee taking a piece of cardboard and wrapping it with a single layer of foil does not represent 45 minutes of work. Punching pins in like this to make that texture definitely does. This is just sandpaper glued on. If you're going to be doing something like that, say you want to use sandpaper for your texture, get 3 different grits of sandpaper and make a collage out of it so it's interesting. If you're going to be doing foil, glue something on there to give it texture and then very carefully apply the foil so it picks up the texture. Do you see what I'm saying, Emily, regarding these?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like the texture ones because, I mean, I like them all, but the texture ones look fun because they kind of look like, well, the earthy ones kind of look like Minecraft cubes, if you know that
Yeah,
game.
yeah, like
And then
these.
yeah, and then that one that's white and like noodles kind of looks like almost like a cake that is painted with frosting, so that's why it looks like textured, but the same color.
Yeah,
It looks like a
I
fun
think
thing to make.
this one is an excellent example of the whole thing because the person did the texture right here, and you can see they only had to submit 2 photos because each photo they took it from this corner, the leading corner of the cube, so you could see 3 sides at a time, and then their other photo shows the other 3 sides. So that's really interesting. But I like this because the texture, it looks, with it all spray painted white, I think it makes it very surreal. But you can also tell they did a really good job with the collage because each of the collages has 6 different pieces, but we can tell very clearly that they've tried very hard to stay, they picked color schemes and then tried really hard to stay with them. I think that those are pretty successful. All right. And I think that is pretty much what I wanted to cover today. Emily, do you have any questions about what we looked at?
I
And
do
about these?
not. I got my questions answered.
Okay. Now, I'm glad if anybody does have any questions or needs some more clarification, we'll talk about it more. But then I want everybody to go through and watch all the videos for the paper mache as well. And there's only like the video that I did that's like an hour and a half long. You don't have to watch the whole thing. Just fast forward it. And I think I may have marked where the minute is that it starts. Fast forward it to the demo. That is a whole demo about carving and everything. And then towards the end, I do show the paper mache. Look at that demo. I show you how to mix it and everything like that. When you do work with paper mache, I highly recommend wearing gloves, like vinyl or latex gloves. If you don't have gloves, remove all your jewelry before you work, but I definitely would recommend very highly that you work with gloves, because otherwise that glue, it treats your skin really badly, and it dries your skin out, and it also gets caught in, if you have little microscopic hairs in the back of your hands, or your um, backs of your fingers or whatever, uh, that glue can get on those, and it really is very uncomfortable to remove. So do your best to wear gloves when you work with paper mache. But look at that, read that, watch those videos, and we will talk about it next week a bit more. But I hope that everybody's had experience working with paper mache before, and you know how to do it. Definitely, though, watch the short video that I made. All right, Emily, are you all ready to do the texture and color cubes now?
I'm ready.
All right, excellent. Now, how this will fit in is we are going to be covering our, I will grade everybody's biomorphic abstraction carving as soon as I see it now. And that will give you an opportunity to go back and smooth it down. And as soon as you resubmit, email me and I will grade it right away. Because as soon as you get that and you get the grade on it and you're ready to go ahead, then I want you to start pulling out the paper mache, because you're going to do one coat of paper mache, let it dry for a day or two, sand it down, do a second coat, same thing, and sand it down so that it's smooth. And in that demo that I did that is attached to the paper mache module, I show you how to smooth it down, and I show you how to do that. So, and we'll talk about that next week as well. And in the meantime, I want you to also be working on the texture and color cubes. And as those are turned in, I will also be responding to them and grading them, so that if you do need to work on the color collage, you can go back and rework it, and then and redo that. And as soon as you resubmit that, email me and I will grade it just as soon as I can. All right. So for today, for the attendance assignment, after watching this, I'm going to also include the video for the applying color to old sculptures, or the color and sculptures video. And if it doesn't show up in our YouTube video that you guys all get the link to, then I want you to watch that link as well. So hopefully that all makes sense. All right. Any other questions that you might have, Emily?
If I felt like it, could I do the color tiles one before the biomorphic abstraction, or do you care that it goes in the right order? Because we'll probably talk about it in the right order in class, so probably the right order.
Well, if you want to, you can be working on all of it at once. That's fine. What is important, the only restriction is that after you apply the paper mache to your biomorphic sculpture, the last thing you're going to be doing is using what you learned making these tiles and apply color and texture to the paper mache.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only real restriction is the color and texture tiles need to be done before that assignment.
Gotcha.
But yeah, if you want to work on them now, that's fine. If you want to work on the carving a bit, then work on those and come back, that's fine. It doesn't really matter which order you do it until you get to that final thing, because that final thing, you need your biomorphic abstraction carving. It needs to be covered with paper mache and sanded, and then you apply the texture and color to it. So that's the order that those need to be done.
Gotcha. And then the only project after this, is that the conceptual art project?
Yes.
After these three?
Yeah.
Wow, this semester is going fast.
It is going really fast. And you will notice I have kind of jumbled up dates and squished them together a little bit, because I want you to have that last week to work on your final, which is the biomorphic abstraction carving with the paper mache and the color and texture. And hopefully that will take you a lot of time because you need to put everything you can into that one. And then also that week is just to get caught up on all the other things. Like we still need to do the critiques, the peer critique and the self-critique. There should be enough things that you see in discussions that other people have done that you can pick one and start doing a critique. And we will talk about that next week as well. Hopefully you'll be here, Emily, to remind me on that, because I want to give a demo on how to do that. And then what's that?
I said absolutely.
All right, great. Because in that demo for that assignment, that was opened up right at the beginning of the semester. And I'll show you which assignment this is. I'm going to share my page really quick. Okay, if we go to applying the tools of artistic critique. Artistic critique my own work, artistic critique someone else's work. What this is going to be is you're going to show on screen an image of artwork that either you did for this class this semester or that somebody else did for this class this semester. And while that is on the screen, you are going to record yourself talking about it and applying the 4 tools of artistic critique: describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. You're going to make a 3-minute video for an image of your own work done for this class this semester. And you're going to do a separate 3-minute video of somebody else's with an image of somebody else's work done for this class this semester. And that's what we are going to be talking about next week. All right?
Yep, sounds good.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and sign off in just a second again, or in just a second. And I want to remind people that that video we watched in full color, Ancient Sculpture Reimagined, if it is not showing up in our class YouTube video, I will have the link underneath so you can watch that as well. All right. If you don't have any more questions, then thank you very much, Emily, for joining me today. And I hope everybody has an absolutely wonderful 4th of July weekend. Stay safe. Do not blow up anything you do not have permission to. Growing up, my mother was a licensed pyrotechnician, so we had an awful lot of fun for 4th of July and fireworks.
Wasn't your mother wasn't your mother a librarian?
She was a librarian as well.
And
She was
a licensed pyrotechnician. That's kind of an awesome combination.
She was a chemist. She was a researcher. She was a licensed pyrotechnician, and she was a librarian. She did a lot of different things, and she was also a professional artist. So she specialized in romantic expressionism, and she was an impressionist that specialized in romantic expressionism. Did some really wonderful artwork. But yeah, she was an amazing lady, and I can talk a lot of nice stuff about her because she's passed away and she can't refute me. Luckily, my brothers all agree with me. All right, well, Emily, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, or want clarification on the comments that I've made about your work, contact me, and we will visit about it, and I will answer all your questions. All right?
All right, thank you, sir. Hope you have a good holiday weekend as well.
You too, gosh darn it. All right, we'll see you.
Bye.